The crackle of flames has a sound you never forget. It's like the earth itself is screaming, and in that moment, you feel smaller than dust. My name is Daniel Hayes, and I never imagined my own neighbors would be the ones to set my world on fire. Literally. That morning had started like any other. Coffee, a quiet stretch on the porch, the same oak tree swaying in the breeze that I planted with my late wife years ago. It was more than a tree, it was memory, it was family, it was everything we had built together before cancer took her away. That tree survived storms, floods, and lightning strikes. But it wouldn't survive what was coming. My subdivision had something called an HOA, homeowners association. Now, if you've ever had one, you know the power those boards can hold. They weren't just about mowing lawns or painting fences the same color. They wanted control, down to the flowers you plant and the guests you invite. From the start, I refused to join. I had my land before that HOA ever formed. Legally, I wasn't bound to them. But to them, that wasn't acceptable. They came at me with letters first. Then fines. Then warnings. When I ignored all of that, they started sending people to my porch to intimidate me. They said things like, "This community has rules, Mr. Hayes. It'd be easier if you just fell in line." But I wasn't about to bend. Not to them. Not when I knew the law better than they did. Because before I retired, I wasn't just some stubborn old man. I was the one who wrote the property statutes for the state. Still, I underestimated them. That night, while I sat reading in my living room, the smell of smoke hit me. At first, I thought maybe one of the neighbors had lit a bonfire. But then came the popping sound of glass breaking, and before I could even react, the curtains in my living room went up like paper. The fire spread too fast, it wasn't an accident. I barely made it out with the clothes on my back. By the time the firefighters arrived, my home was nothing but embers. I remember standing there barefoot in the wet grass, watching everything I loved burn to the ground. My wife's wedding dress I kept in the closet. The photographs of our kids when they were small. Even the journal she wrote me when she knew her time was short. All of it, gone. My heart broke, but anger took root right beside it. The HOA thought they could scare me into compliance. They thought fire would silence me. But what they didn't know was that in destroying my home, they handed me every weapon I needed to bring them down. Because I knew their every loophole, their every weakness. And if they thought I was powerless, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The morning after the fire, they came. Suits, sunglasses, smug smiles, like wolves circling the ashes of my life. The HOA president, a man named Richard Crane, had the nerve to shake his head at me. "Tragic accident," he muttered. "But maybe now you'll understand how important community compliance is. We'll discuss rebuilding once you're ready to join us officially." I didn't answer. I just looked at him with the kind of silence that burns hotter than any flame. For weeks, I lived in a cheap motel. But every night, I wrote. Not in grief, no, in precision. I dug up every case file, every precedent, every statute I had personally written into law decades ago. They thought they could use intimidation and power to force me under their thumb. What they didn't realize was that the laws they broke weren't just guidelines. They were my words, and I remembered every one of them. Arson. Harassment. Conspiracy. Property rights violations. Extortion. The list grew longer every time I thought about it. And I wasn't going to the police alone, I went to the press. I went to the state attorney's office. I went to every legal contact I had built in my 30 years of service. And when I told them the HOA burned down my house, they almost laughed, until I showed them proof. Security footage from a neighbor who trusted me more than the board. Insurance reports showing accelerants used in the fire. And most of all, Richard Crane's words, recorded on my phone, admitting that rebuilding would only happen if I complied. The case exploded. Suddenly, the HOA that once held all the power was scrambling. Homeowners who had been bullied into silence for years finally stepped forward. They admitted to being fined thousands for things as petty as a child's bike left in the driveway. Some confessed they were too scared to fight back because the HOA had threatened foreclosure. But my fire gave them courage. If they could burn down my house, what would stop them from targeting others? The trial dragged on for months, but in that courtroom, I didn't just fight for myself. I fought for every person who ever felt powerless against people who thought rules made them kings. When the verdict came, it was unanimous. Richard Crane and several board members were convicted on charges ranging from arson to racketeering. The HOA was dissolved permanently. My neighbors cried when they heard the news. Some hugged me. Some thanked me. But all I could do was look down at my hands, the same hands that had once written the laws these people had broken, and whisper, "It's done." Months later, with the settlement money and community support, we rebuilt. Not just my home, but the entire spirit of the neighborhood. Without the HOA's iron fist, people painted their houses the colors they wanted. Kids played in yards without fear of fines. Gardens bloomed wild and free. And me? I planted a new oak tree where the old one had burned. Not because I thought it would replace the past, but because it meant the future was still worth growing. As I sat on my porch one evening, watching that young tree sway in the wind, a reporter asked me if I had any last words for the HOA that tried to destroy me. I smiled, not with anger, but with the quiet power of someone who had already won. They thought the law was against them, I said. But they forgot, I wrote the law.